Hi guys, welcome to Second Perspective. My name is Paul Weston. Over there is guy with cork in mouth, Tom McLaughlin. Is that a cork?
Yeah, that's a cork.
Oh, wonderful. Clearly, well, first of all, we're doing a discussion on Upstream color, and apparently,
Upstream color. Good. Stay focused.
yeah, and apparently, Tony needs to be a little more drunk to discuss this film because
I had one beer. Yes.
one
I
beer.
did.
Well, you have a cork. I imagine that's from.
It's a beer with a cork. I mean,
Really interesting.
what are you, my fucking mother? Jesus Christ.
So, well, let's just get straight to the thing that we we were discussing a lot off air, off screen, whatever, and that's largely our frustrations with the film, that, like, we don't even know what we're supposed to ponder, and, like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, with sort of the lack of, we understand it's a on film, and some of it is supposed to have their own interpretations, but we felt like the film was sort of pulling us in two kind of different directions, right?
Yeah, many different directions. Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to take from the film as a whole, and that's fine. Like, if you want the experience of a film to be alienating, which this film I think does in many ways, that's cool. I think it also wants to resonate with you in certain ways too, and I saw certain themes and like images as being like something the director was trying, and the director, writer, and producer, and the guy who stars in it as the relationship dude. What's his name? Jake Carruthers? Shane Carruth. He plays in the film. If you've even seen it after our review, I don't know if you've even seen it, or if we're just having this discussion for our own sake. I'm really not sure what this film wanted me to take away from it. One thing that they emphasize, or that the film emphasizes throughout, is Walden, Thoreau.
Do you want to give a brief?
Basically, Walden is a novel, a short story. It's like a novella written in the late 19th century by Henry David Thoreau.
Are you Googling it right now?
Just wanted to make sure I got his name right. I was like all of a sudden obsessively upset about myself. About going into the woods for 2 years, a year and a half or something, and trying to make a life for himself outside of like upstate New York sort of thing, on his own, in the elements, to get in tune with nature again, because he sees this process of modernization, doesn't like it, thinks that we've lost something in modern life, and so goes out on his own to make a life on the homestead with his own hands, and writes about it. And so they bring up Thoreau bring up Walden from the beginning in that initial hypnosis scene. That's one of her tasks, is to transcribe pages from Walden. And then there's this sort of weird thing with the pigs, where each of the hypnosis subjects is like identified with a pig. This guy who comes in to save them, maybe not to save them. I'm not sure his.
Yeah, I don't even know his relationship with these people.
Yeah, he's a controller in some regard, and I thought he was like sort of a savior figure in the first, but anyway, we can talk about him in a bit. He does these blood transplants which take the maggots out of these people that are emitting this brain controlling chemical, I guess, and inducing hypnosis. So the pigs then have this whatever
this weird
inside the brain.
spiritual biological connection.
Their normal lives, but there's this whole weird like post-humanist vibe to that, where we're considering humanity on this grander scale, as linked biologically to our environment, as like the potential for making ourselves prosthetic in some way, and our like attunement within some sort of ecological whole. I thought the film was trying to speak to those things, even though it doesn't have an argument. And I thought that Walden was sort of like the distant progenitor of eco-criticism, and not post-humanist, but eco-critical thought. And I thought there was something like very academic about that going on, but I really couldn't tell what the film wanted us to draw from that. Maybe it was just supposed to blur the boundaries between humanity and pig life or something. But
the thing that was really strange.
What do you think about that whole?
Well, the thing that kind of confuses me is like it does a little bit like of that, but it's sort of in the background a little bit, when it spends so much time focusing on these two characters interacting with each other, and then sort of out of the blue, the woman deciding she wants to kill this guy, and I'm not
Right.
sure.
She kills him. I forgot about that.
Yeah, right. Like she suddenly can see him in their connected worlds, and like it was all really beautifully edited, and it was a very sort of seamless experience. And like that's my concern with this stuff. Is like okay, it looks cool, it sounds really nice, and it's all edited in a very fascinating way, but I don't understand the actual substance to it all. And maybe it's just because you and I are really dumb. I think that's a little more likely for me than it is for you, Mr. Grad School. But
Oh
the
man, I have no real knowledge of film.
but but the whole thing about this is just like I don't know. Maybe it's I also hung too tightly to the beginning of the film because the beginning half hour of the film I found really interesting, where it's like this guy's using these weird worms from this strange plant that basically has people linked to each other, and that like if he does this, the other person does that. It's like those weird drama things we used to do in class, where it's like you had to be a mirror, but like it was
Right,
actually
yeah. Which I
right.
thought was cool.
Yeah, and then somehow it turns into you can only do what I tell you kind of thing, and like I still that as a sort of a theme or a something to ponder. I found really interesting, like the idea that some way somehow somebody can take over your life or trick you into basically not controlling yourself at all. That's a very real fear that I think not just me but like a lot of people have, especially in sort of this sort of time in society where it's like I'm just
Yeah,
running through
in
the
a corporate
motions,
environment especially. Yeah.
right? And I thought that was really interesting, and the idea that she loses everything. I'm like, okay, that's really cool. And then it totally just breaks. It feels like both thematically and sort of like narratively, like this guy doesn't come back to like the very end, and then it just becomes about the relationship. And I having a very hard time. Maybe it's because I'm connecting and holding on to the beginning section so much, but I don't. I'm very like where what? How does it all connect?
Yeah, no,
Right?
I think you're right to point out that that beginning sequence does feel pretty distinct
Mm.
from the rest of the
And
film.
I loved it. If it was the entire film was that way, then I really enjoy this film. But
I don't know. I thought it was interesting, and
mm,
at the same time, I thought like I got it right away, you
mm,
know.
yeah,
And then the tasks
mm,
that he has her carry out
mm,
are sort of inane, and I mean not inane for them, those
mm,
characters, but for me, after I've grasped the point that she's under his control,
mm,
and the sort of
mm,
most dramatic part about that is there are two very
mm,
dramatic points about her hypnosis period.
mm,
She empties her bank accounts for him, and then
mm,
she stabs herself.
mm,
And honestly, since we don't see that character again, I wonder like what the connection is or
mm,
whatever. And there's some sort of like idea about criminal abuse
mm,
there, and it might be like, okay, is this the other character that comes in, the guy, the
mm,
Foley artist who
mm,
fixes her up and does the blood transfusion and
mm,
removes the maggots from her bloodstream that are infecting her mind. You view him as sort of a savior figure, and you think there might be this interplay between this criminal guy and the savior guy, and there is none.
mm.
It totally drops the criminal guy.
See, I
And
would have.
focuses on her life and as she tries to rebuild it
Mm,
after she's gone through this weird phase. So that's where these different interlocking symbolic orders started to come in. And
mm,
there's a moment when she's in a clinical setting and somebody says, you've got stage 2, whatever type of cancer,
mm,
you probably won't be able to bear children, sort of thing. And she's unaware of the fact that she's had a surgery. And so you think maybe this whole idea of being infected by a maggot and being controlled by this guy who's induced her hypnosis is maybe a metaphor for what a cancer patient goes through. They lose a lot of money, they lose a lot of their life,
which
and
honestly, sorry, I
which I
thought.
thought worked. I don't think
Yeah.
the film denies that possibility.
Mm.
It seems to at the end when it picks this one. I
This
don't know.
strange
I think
pig
it just
thing.
like it's very elusive,
Mm,
as in it alludes to these like
mm,
real life dramas, and the whole sense that you get throughout the romantic relationship is that she may be psychotic,
mm,
or he may be psychotic, but I think it's most likely her. The film focuses on her. So there are all these different things about her character that where you wonder like which is the realist frame to view her in, and I don't think the film decides. I don't think it has to.
mm,
And at the same time, there's still something really unsatisfying about the way that it does. And I know that you
mm.
have a good way of conceiving that. I don't know. We were
Well,
talking about
like
it earlier.
Well, I mean, for me, the thing that I struggled most with is just like, okay, if you're gonna go in this like, we don't know what Frank to look her through. It could be any one of these things. That's fine, but then it kind of, I feel like it commits to one of them by doing this whole pig thing of like, we're going to kill this guy who has or has not been doing mean things, and like, she only starts to get really sort of quote unquote psychotic when the pig farmer, takes the piglets from the pregnant pig and then drowns them in the river, right? And like, okay, like this is where it starts to get a little bit confusing for me. Is he goes and he seems through his acting and the things that he kind of does, he's like, oh no, the pig's having piglets, it's freaking me out. I don't know. Well, guys, like one of the only lines the pig farmer has is like, no, it's okay, thanks, whatever. To that guy who's like, people are always looking for new pigs. That's like one of the almost only lines he has, and yet he seems like he's really confused or troubled by these piglets, and he puts them in the river, and then they eventually drown. And it's very sort of visceral and kind of, again, neat and interesting on a visual, filmic level.
Yeah, you see that they've been physically gutted actually after that.
Yeah, right.
Very
And
visceral. Yeah.
and they had leaked this blue thing, which starts to imply like the upstream color and everything. Like, okay, but then these people go to the tree, and normally it has, white flower petals, but now it has blue. And then you realize that through these blue petals, the guy who was at the beginning gets these, this controlling maggots, whatever. My concern is like, if it implies this is a cycle that the people who are troubled by it ultimately, in their weird alter pig form, fuels the circle, then why is he so confused or scared of the piglets? Shouldn't he know this is a process of it? Right? And the nail for me that really cements he doesn't totally know what he's doing is that he brings some random guy that says, we're looking for people are always looking for baby pigs, right? And I don't understand that. And then it makes it all about this guy who's doing weird things to the pig, and I don't know if it's like saying, yeah, in the end, we're all pigs in a farm, and we need to take care of each other, and like we need to set ourselves free or whatever. But like if that's what the film's all about, then what the fuck is the 45 minutes in between about? When it's the woman hearing voices in the house and everything, like that's what I don't understand. It's like if you're gonna be strange and like maybe hint at this cancer thing or whatever, which is fine, but don't go at the end and then give us a very like concrete possibility of like we're all pigs in the pen, because then the last 45 minutes you had, I don't get it. Like what how am I supposed to connect these sort of three very distinct elements of your film, which you all link and don't link at the same time?
I mean, the relationship thing especially doesn't need an explanation outside of itself for the disjunctive atmosphere of it. I think the more I think about it, there's the initial scene where Jeff and Chris, the female character, meet on the bus. They meet on the bus, even though it's inferred that they knew each other for a long time before. They've already been married, and that he's trying to re-spark her memory after she's come through this trauma or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
crap, I didn't get that at all.
There's this whole like density to the time where I don't think the relationship proceeds linearly. There's this whole like he's trying to remind her of herself, yes, but of the relationship that they had in the past, and they're trying to sort of rebuild in a sense. And then it's cut with these scenes, I think, of the relationship in flux before that, like when it was going wrong or whatever. But they're not connected to any one of the symbolic structures of the movie in particular. They sort of like seem to work in all of them, which I think means that they don't really work in all of them. I think it doesn't. This like romantic aspect doesn't need any explanation outside of itself. It seems like a few short films here were gathered together and like thrown around each other in ways that are interesting, but not really interesting.
Yeah,
they didn't grip me. There was nothing integral about this sort of like psychomachia between That's a bad, this sort of devil angel figure
Mm.
where you think this criminal and the savior are going to have some important influence on their lives throughout. And the savior figure sort of does, even though he turns out not to be a savior and that sort of thing. And it's like I don't think it needs that wider structure. Like as a relationship study that plays with time and plays with emotion, it might have worked on its own, that romance part, but trying to fit it into like this, the idea of us all being pigs in the pen and depending on each other and depending on other species and depending on like, I don't know, life as this biological whole in some sense. I think that's what it gestures towards is it's hard to reconcile.
Yeah, well, and like that's the big thing that they often teach us in film, and like maybe um, the guy has also made a film called Primer, and I haven't seen it myself, but Nathan, a guy that sometimes comes on to QQ, has seen it, and he's told me it's a film that just kind of goes, and it's about time travel, and it doesn't bother to explain everything to you, and he kind of found it really fascinating. It's like he goes, I have no idea what they're talking about, but I believe that they know what they're talking about, and I hope to God I am talking about the same guy, but I'm pretty sure I am.
Yeah,
And
it
so
is. That's
okay, okay, so he very clearly has the director I mean has a clear idea of what he wants his films to be, and so maybe he's sort of fighting against the form or of the conventions of film, but generally in most films the first 20 to 30 minutes you set into a film kind of creates the questions or thoughts or feelings that people will have at the beginning of the film, and usually like in the Pixar films and everything they set up a question and like ultimately will this happen, and so when he has this particular setup in the first 30 minutes of his film I have these questions that I want answered, and then when he goes into the relationship part, and it becomes very different, and like they don't even talk about the fact that they both have the same kind of wounds and everything like that. It just becomes I become a frustrated film viewer, right? And it's just like these ideas in isolation might be neat, but I may not appreciate them to their fullest value if you lead me to believe the film will be about one thing and then drastically change what it's going to be about in the second one, and then kind of have this weird particular tone, and then in the third part, kind of completely derail against that, right? And it's just that's I guess ultimately is my frustration with the films. That I don't mind watching films that are a little bit strange or confused or whatever, but I just feel like I watch someone with like ADD on like what they want to tell me, right? And it's just I don't know. I just want a very clear focus of like ultimately I want to focus on this thing, right? So it feels like ultimately he was a very surface level on like the numerous things he talks about, and he doesn't even go into depth of any one of these 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 things that he goes about, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a failure of like a lot of postmodern art is
Hmm.
the mistake that like surface analogies, symbolic connections, and that sort of thing, referring us back to like the loss of meaning in wider life, and if we can even say like in real life, or um, throwing that into suspicion. I like those projects and everything, but I still want the work to be interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and to show that it's playing with certain tropes and certain symbolic orders in ways that are integrally meaningful and that add something to a symbolic discussion over time. And when I say over time, I'm talking about like the whole history of investment with a certain symbol. I think if you start to do like very experimental, abstract, avant-garde work
Hmm.
like this, then you owe your audience something new.
Hmm.
And I don't know if this film actually did that for me. I
Yeah.
think it seemed kind of vapid, and it seemed to like play on the assumption that if you accelerate symbolic connections and if you structure your dialogue uh, in ways that are disorienting and alienating, then it'll be interesting.
Hmm.
Not necessarily.
I mean,
I
on a
think,
surface mechanical level, sure, but like you use those tools to accentuate what you're talking about underneath everything, right? But he
yeah,
wasn't necessarily
and
talking. Or at least we. And like, here's the thing: like, he probably has something he wants to talk about, but through what his script and the filmmaking, we weren't able to grab it. We're not two particularly stupid people. Like, we are open to receiving something. It's just we were unable to get it right. Why don't we very briefly end on sort of the thing that you did enjoy is the sound design, because
right, okay.
the yeah, like we can talk about that briefly before we ease the
Yeah,
pain of
no, I
this.
think in terms of like formal innovation and self reflexivity and self consciousness as a film, um, and as like a certain self reflexivity that makes the viewer aware of how they're being manipulated, sort of, or the experience that they are going along with. This film does a really good job in terms of sound design of accentuating like what it's doing formally as it's doing it. It's a pretty clever thing to do. Have this Foley artist basically looking for cool, interesting ways to make new noises. The purpose of which, like these soundscapes that he makes in the film, have something to do with drawing these other characters that have all supposedly been hypnotized, drawing them in, and it's part of his therapy process. It's also it's something he's like intensely interested in, it seems, for himself. There are many shots of him sitting in like the pig pen alone, playing with his little MIDI controller or his little keyboard, and just listening to himself working sounds around. So I don't know what it's really saying. Anyway, I thought it was really cool. At about the 30-minute mark, this film has a sequence of this like Foley artist figure going around into the environment, running his file over a big underpass, corrugated steel drain pipe, and like he sees a telephone pole and records it and that sort of stuff. So the sounds that he's picking up and modulating, you actually see their sources and you see the process of modulation that he's like affecting them with, and
the thing that
become highly like concentrate on the actual sound of the film, and then the rest of it I was just like in tune with the rest of the sound design after that. And I think it's cool that it does that 30 minutes in. It's like, hey, look at what you haven't been noticing so far. I'm going to make you notice this now. And I thought that was cool. I like that.
Yeah, the one thing I'll mention on that scene I also thought was pretty neat is like, while the Foley artist is doing all those kind of neat sounds, it was cutting in between Jeff and Chris's scenes, where it'd be like, the file would be going along the underpass, and then it would start from there and then turn into a fax machine, and then like the humming from the power cord or the thingamabobber. What's that?
Yeah, a telephone pole.
Thank you. Telephone pole would turn into a...
Oh, it's amazing. They're almost so natural in my landscape. Like, I've never been around when there haven't been telephone poles. No, that's a really good point. And I mean, it emphasizes the fact that he's experimenting and they are not. And they occupy, their jobs are pretty, like, typically contemporary modern industrial jobs, She works at a printing place and he works filing reports for a law firm, and so the sounds
by that point she's in the poster thing.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant, printing by printing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
other than that,
if there's any sort of argument there, it's just like an Armory Schaefer type argument. Just listen for the purpose of listening, and you'll see that some of the like industrial technological environments that we're in are pretty harsh, and things that we hear there seem a lot more like noise than they do about sound and thinking about the world like sonically. And I thought that was really cool, and it impacted me. I went to put a bowl of soup in the microwave and I was like really hearing the microwave opening and shutting stuff. So that was cool, and I think that moment was a total A+, and I would love people to see that without having to see the rest of the film.
Yeah. I feel like they would have to see at least some of the film to kind of get the understanding and the vibe of it all. But
yeah, me too.
That's something we'll leave you guys, the viewers, to ponder. Would you, I guess you already saw it, but would you recommend someone watching the first 35 minutes to see those moments, or is it not? Other than that, this is Second Perspective. My name is Paul Weston. Over there is Mr. Beardman. And
thank you, Beardy Man.
Goodbye, Internet. I'll see you later.
Yeah, see you guys. You guys suck.